Can I count on your vote?
What's this for? Adam versus the man of government. I'm not so bad.
We're okay here. Appreciate if you don't interrupt. Thank you.
Were you having a nice day?
Here, have some government.
My name's David. I'm at the Chatsworth Courthouse because I got caught doing what everyone else does. And needed a copy of this so I could hire a lawyer and have it dismissed.
Hey, not every one of us makes illegal U-turns like a crazy person all over the place. I mean, but you actually said you thought you were putting people at danger. Like this was a dangerous move that you were making on the road here.
I would just say it was late at night and there was no one around, so I don't really think I put anyone in danger, but like probably shouldn't be something people do regularly.
But okay, so you exercised your judgment. You did something that you thought was reasonable, and now you're not saying that the law is necessarily bullshit, but that particular instance, like, you know, that maybe some leeway in judgment would have been allowed, would have been nice. But you're of the frame of mind that this is something that you the cop was acting legitimately, right?
Yeah, I think he saw what he saw. He couldn't ignore it. Did his job. I don't blame him much, but
okay. Except that all cops have to enforce, do things against their better judgment all the time, and they sell out their own judgment to enforce bullshit laws, right?
That's true.
Okay. But you're here not to pay this. This citation is for $240, right?
$240. I'm here because I already did traffic school in the last 18 months, and I can't do it again or I get a point on my record, and so that's like the real issue. And so if I get it dismissed, I don't have to do traffic school. I don't get a point on my record. My insurance premium doesn't go up. Everyone wins, or I win.
And so if you could only afford $240, you'd pay the citation, you take the point on your record. But because you can afford an extra $110, you're going to hire a lawyer instead that's going to make this go away.
That's what he says. I guess they don't really make guarantees. But yeah, I hope so. That's the plan.
So let's assume that what you did was an actual crime. Do you see how you're facing a system now that specifically is set up to disadvantage poor people?
Yeah, and it's just like really sketchy in general too. These guys don't tell you how they do it. They don't tell you like what they do. They say we talk to some guys and it gets worked out, which is like the weirdest part. It seems like it should be something everyone can do, but for some reason you have to hire a lawyer and they talk to someone. So I don't really get it. Apparently it works. And so I'm giving it a try. I've never done it before.
It's like lawyers are magicians, right? And they've cast this spell over everybody else. Then they go to Congress and they write laws, and then they control everybody like puppet masters, right?
Who am I? I have nothing to say about it. Don't know anything about it. That's it. I just know if I write the check, then it'll get solved.
Well, you're a slightly wealthier tax cow to be exploited by the system.
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. So this doesn't. You're not endorsing this system, are you? You're not choosing to engage in it. You're just
the hole's there, and I'm gonna take advantage of it because it's to my benefit too. And I mean, just because like I know and it sounds like shitty and it sounds like kind of like a corrupt way to go about it. I mean, people do it all the time. There's nothing I really should feel bad about. I don't think that like me paying the violation is necessarily, I guess, the just response to me performing that illegal U-turn.
You didn't create the system. You're just operating based on the incentives that are in front of you, right?
I mean, it makes sense for me to hire this lawyer. I don't want to pay more on my insurance, and if he can get rid of that, then it works. Yeah.
Right. Well, if that in and of itself was like endorsing the system, you wouldn't do it. But because it has like a neutral effect, you're comfortable with that. Is that fair to say?
Truthfully, I just like don't really care much about it. I don't really feel guilty. I don't know a lot of people who get a traffic ticket and they like truly feel guilty about what they did. It's like, it seems kind of nonsense. People just get like pissed and try and solve it. So
you see how government here is by taking the monopoly on providing for the public safety, right? Like if you do something that's actually dangerous on the road, it's the government's responsibility to provide some system that mitigates that or lessens the danger of being on the road in general, right? And yet it has turned it into another system that serves to transfer money from the poor to the rich or from people to the lawyer class or into the government.
A lawyer, right.
Well, plus the cops get to charge for their services, and the court gets to charge for their services, and it's probably a heck of a lot more than $250 going into processing your citation here, and then they get to take that money from you again as a taxpayer. Do you think that's kind of inherent to the nature of government?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's like obviously a lot of inefficiencies that people are always frustrated about, always talking about. Like I'm sure DMV and traffic violations definitely fit like right into that slot. So, I mean, yeah, it's not a great system. No one really goes through this and thinks like that was well managed, that worked out quickly. It's not. I don't think anyone really thinks it's that easy of a process. The fact that you have to wait 3 months to even resolve the situation is like telling enough of how disorganized I think it all is.
So the big question though is why? Why this multi-million-dollar courthouse? Why this system of government being in charge of public safety? Why this citation? Why this silly lawyer racket? What's your theory?
I think probably mismanagement on upper levels. I think there's the biggest problem that people have in general with government employees and the entire, I don't know, the whole system.
So one last question then. Yeah. So if we just got the right people into government, you're saying the whole thing would work out fine?
Well, that's one thing. Or just if you were to be able to manage these institutions to a little bit of a better degree where the incentives of the employees are actually matched towards the entire overall organization. So you don't have like the guy working at the DMV who you just look at and is almost in like, slow-mo, and you just like can't get why this guy can't be motivated to actually perform on a level that you think is like reasonable for someone who's getting paid what he's getting paid or like has the education that he has, I guess.
That's because it's government. That's because it's not accountable to people like the way that a market-based institution is accountable to its customers. Yeah. A government is something that is detached from accountability to the voters.
Like an institution is itself, like an individual agency, this courthouse. I'm sure they could do a better job.
You don't think we just do better without government altogether?
I guess that's a different conversation. I think there's, purpose to everything. I think government has its purpose. It shows that on a daily basis. But
you mean to steal from people?
A little bit of that, but I don't know. Things aren't so bad if you look around, right? The world keeps working.
Yeah, thank goodness the government hasn't screwed up everything.
Yeah, so not everything is blown to shreds, right? The streets are still running, everything, for the most part. There's a purpose, there's an order.
Hold on. I just moved to LA. And you're from here, right? And your justification for why government is good or why we need government is the roads. And I drive around here and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Do you realize that every time you're sitting in traffic on the 405, what you are doing is sitting in a government line. Yeah, it's like a bread line. It's the same thing. The same fundamental principles apply. You were in a line to go somewhere, and government is preventing people from going there. And if someone says, "Well, what if we have no government?" Your answer is, "Who will build the roads?" Like, really?
Well, I buy it. I guess so. What's your argument then? To have some private entity be in charge of like all I don't know, all the different institutions that the government runs? Is that the alternative?
Well, it can be publicly owned corporations. It can be companies. It can be there are different ways of structuring it conceptually. Okay. But government is forced. The reason government services are always so terrible compared to free market services is because you've removed accountability from the person who's actually receiving those services. And if we had roads built by people that didn't point guns at other people through government to take money from them through citations, then we wouldn't have all of these problems inherent to that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I would just say that, I guess it goes to a little bit of a greater scale. So what were you just saying? Do you mind repeating that for me one more time?
That if we didn't have institutions that were based on coercion and force and pointing guns at people in order to extract money. Well, we already spoke to an officer who came out and talked to us, and we read the thing on the wall there, and he said as long as we weren't filming the entrances, I believe it was an Officer Smith, wasn't it? Was his name? It was a shorter, thicker gentleman. Thank you, sir. We're cleared. Yeah, we're okay here. Appreciate if you don't interrupt. Thank you.
All right.
See what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would just say that there are obviously abuses that go the other way too, right? So you bring in a corporation, we all know like the way that kind of works out as well. Whether or not they're going to be, motivated by shareholders and have that to be kind of like a checks and balances system is one thing, but like shareholders' incentives are obviously towards one thing as well.
The only reason there are the kind of problems we have today with corporations is because governments protect them from liability.
Well, that's true, but also governments also regulate them on the other side as well, right? So as much
No,
as
but government. See, hold on, this is the thing. Corporate behavior is far more determined by consumer choice than by government regulation. If the consumers say, all right, you do that, we're not going to buy anything from you anymore, that stops it. Regulation means, well, maybe we're going to have to lobby and buy off a politician, like you were mentioning earlier, in order to get a regulation change to service. Or they go, give us regulation because that drives away competition because it makes it harder for smaller businesses to come up and compete, which is essentially forcing you to have less of a choice as a consumer.
I mean, I don't know. It's definitely hard to say. It's not like I could tell you that anything you're saying is wrong. I agree with a lot of it. I guess like the problem is you got to find the solution or the alternative, right? And until there's an alternative, no one's ready to really consider making a move or like, moving towards action. There's no sense of urgency. There's no real, next step. So what do we do? Right. And I guess like that's where a lot of people are sitting today. That's why a lot of people are frustrated with the way things are going on. I guess that's probably why you're making the video.
I don't want to take any more of your time, but actually, if you want to keep talking, I mean, that's kind of what I'm selling is the answer to that.
I believe it. It sounds like it.
Localization. You take governments apart from the top down. I'm actually running for president in 2020 on the platform of an orderly dissolution of the United States federal government.
Okay.
Can I count on your vote?
You absolutely can, yeah.
The way the government operates is to take money from taxpayers using means funded by taxpayers to organize theft and exploit people.
Fine, under a balanced society, you can have that, but we can't have our system.
It's 2 years away from 50% plus of Americans supporting legalizing marijuana.
I told him, this is the message that people live and die for.